Good morning, YouTube. This is Dano from the Sonic Decks, bringing you to an Infernoble deck profile. I finally have the deck finished. Shoutouts to Sean and AJ for really helping me put together this deck and finish it, because I will have to admit this is not a very cheap deck. However, I do think this version is pretty budgety for the most part, and the cards have been fluctuating in price a little bit. So you can get your hands on this deck for relatively cheap. And I think this deck is really fun to play. It's one of the top decks right now. And this is just my take on it. This has been pretty successful for me. I've taken it to a couple of locals, done pretty well with it. And overall, I just think it's really fun to play. I love Warrior decks. I love Neospace Connector. So let's just get right into it. First, we'll start with 3 Neospace Connector and 1 Neospatial Aqua Dolphin. This is the best normal summon in the deck. This is kind of the main normal summons. Neospatial Aqua Dolphin is not very bad to normal summon on its own, because you can just rip a card from the hand. Or, starting off with Neospace Connector, it either baits a hand trap, or you get out the Neospatial Aqua Dolphin, and you get to look at your opponent's hand and rip a card from it. It's pretty good, so no need to explain much more about that. Next, for the actual Infernoble cards, we do play 3 Oliver. This is the best one. Nibiru hurts this deck probably more than any of the other meta decks right now. So you want to essentially have an Oliver in your hand all the time, just to make sure that you can still play after getting Nibiru. 2 Renauds. Most decks you'll be seeing play 3, and that's totally cool. However, I think 2 works for my version, because I'm playing a 40 card version, so I need space, and I don't like starting with Renaud unless I can get Gearfried to the field really soon. This is really just good for follow-up play, or it's really good if you have like kind of nothing else. It's kind of a decent extender, but it's probably my second favorite of the Infernoble cards, so I just think you only need 2. And then 1 Ogier. You don't really want to see too many of this card, because it doesn't do anything on its own. All it does is send something to the graveyard from the deck. It doesn't do enough on its own. You kind of need other extenders to make it work. So that's why I think you should really only need 1. If you're playing like more of a 60 card variant, maybe you should play 2 or 3. But for the 40 card version that I recommend, I just recommend 1. Next, I recommend 3 Fire Flint Ladies. You could totally cut this down to 1 or 2. But I definitely think this is amazing, because this only requires a warrior, not a fire warrior like Renaud does. And also, it can tribute itself to summon any level 4 or lower warrior from your hand, and it can't be targeted. So it has a lot of really cool applications, and it's searchable with things like Rhoda and Durandal. So that's why I think this at 3 is really, really nice. I totally recommend it. And then I only play 1 Red Layer. I know some versions play 2 or 3, and if you wanted to swap out Fire Flint Ladies for more Red Layers, you totally can, because then that gives it more options as an extender over just an engine requirement. But for my variant, due to space, and I just prefer Fire Flint Lady over Super Quantum, I would rather just play the 1 myself. And then I only play 1 Gearfried. Gearfried to me is kind of like Chaos Dragon Levianeer, where it's really, really good, and it does a lot for the deck, but it's kind of bricky if you see too many of it, or it's kind of bricky in your starting hand unless you have other extenders. So I'd almost kind of rather be searching Gearfried rather instead of actually drawing into it. It's a great follow-up card. It's really great, and if you're playing a 60 card variant, I totally recommend bumping this up. But just for the 40 card variant, I just recommend kind of the 1. That's it for the Fire Warriors. Next, I am playing the small Armageddonite package with the Plague Spreader. The reason I totally recommend this is if you open up a couple of bricks, such as the Genba, or another one that will be coming up soon, you can essentially keep playing. Because if you open up Genba, it gets really kind of difficult to play your combos unless you have a way to get a level 2 tuner to the field without like doing some weird stuff. So I think that's good to play. And next, I play the Dustspot 001. This card is really good. It's kind of mandatory for like the necessary combo. This is what you want to search off of Haka Fibrax, and it's kind of the thing that lets you go to the combo. The next big brick in the deck is the Coltwing. Oddly enough, if you open up the Coltwing, you do not lose. You just essentially go into the Plague Spreader combo, because Plague Spreader puts this card back into your deck so that you can use it for later. That's why it's really good, and it all triggers off 001. It is essentially the replacement for a Beastalion, and that's why it's really good. That's it for the actual like real monsters of the deck. Next we get to hand traps. For this version we only play 6, so we play the 3 Droll. You could probably switch these for Ashes if you really wanted to. However, with Dragon Link being such a big formidable force in the meta right now, and it also hits Dogmatica a little bit, hits Infernoble a little bit right now, I think for the format being, this is kind of a good hand trap that I think should probably be mained. It's a bit better than Ash. It's a little bit more high impact. If you're playing something that can play a lot more hand traps, maybe you want some extra low impact hand traps because they require more of them. But since this deck can play a low amount of hand traps, I'd rather have a lot more high impact hand traps. So then next we come to the Gamma package. Gamma is probably the best hand trap in the game right now because it's so good going first, so good going second. It hits so many things. It's bad player bait. It does a lot of things for you. Yeah, it sucks that you have to play a Garnet in the deck, but it is totally worth it to play. It's super affordable right now because of all the reprints it has. This is an amazing card right now. And that's it for all of the monsters in the deck. Next we get to spells. So first, we play 3 Heritage of Chalice. This searches for all of your Infernoble cards, and it also searches for your Durendal. And it's so good, flexible. It partners off with Renaud or Ogier really well. This is just a really good card to have. It essentially makes the deck have 7 Rotas. It is really good. And then next, we play 3 Durendal. This is a mandatory for the deck. You equip it to something, and you search any of your level 5 or lower fire warriors, which is 90% of your monsters, and then it pops itself. This is really, really good to play mandatory 3 of, and it's the only one I think you need to play in a 40 card version. For mine, I am playing the 3 DDR. I've tested 1 DDR to 3 Living Fossil. I've tried that variant. However, I think more applications come up for this. I think it really just depends on what kind of version of the deck you're playing, but the way I know how to play the deck and the combos that I know how to do and prefer to make, I think you need 3 DDR, and it's just the way I prefer to play it. And then just 3 more equips. Living Fossil is really good. Good hard draw because it's basically a Monster Reborn. Fun interaction is you can summon Herald of Arclight off of it, and while it technically negates the on-field effect, you can still pay cost, and Arclight resolves in the graveyard, so you can tribute Arclight with its effect and still resolve, which is really cool. Divine Sword. This is probably the best equip spell. You almost always want to be sending this early because you banish cards with it, and then it add it back to your hand. It makes your DDRs free. That's why you want to play this. Smoke Grenade. Probably the dumbest card in the deck because you get to look at your opponent's hand, rip a card for free. It is super good. You should really be playing this if you're playing Infernoble. This is the reason you want to play Infernoble. It's probably going to be banned in December, though. And then the 1 Rota, because it is one on the ban list. That is the main deck. It is 40 cards. I think 40 is better than 60, and that's just my opinion on the deck. Next, we'll get to the extra deck. We play 2 Isold. I think you need 2 Isold, because if your Isold gets negated, either its first effect gets negated, or its second effect gets negated, you still want to be able to at least make the 1. Most of the time, they're going to let the first effect go off, but if they negate the first effect, you can punish them by making the second one, and then you can still go off with your plays. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you can still just send your 2 equips to the graveyard, because that's pretty important too. Either way, you want to play 2 Isold. If not to continue playing, it's at least for follow-up. And then, of course, the obligatory Link Cross. This is how you go into your plays with Hockey Fibrex and Auroradon. This is essentially what makes the combos just keep going off. It's really busted in combo decks right now. This is really, really good. And then for my version, I am playing Borrelsword as the last Link monster. You can replace this with Access Code Talker. I don't have an Access Code Talker on me, but I think Borrelsword does the job just fine. You almost always never be going into it. It's just in really weird scenarios where you'll even go into a Borrelsword, but at the end of the day, it's still a good like secondary kind of win condition. And then for the Synchros, because there's a lot of them, we do play Formula Synchron. There are some weird scenarios where Formula Synchron does come up. It's a good level 2 tuner. It's a machine. It draws you cards. It's pretty good. Martial Metal Marcher. This is for the combo, the early combo. It's really, really good. Tatsunogo. This is also for the combo. Remember, this is unaffected by monster effects. So if they wait to Nibiru you when you have this on the board, you can keep this. And this essentially makes Haga Vibrak combos. So remember that. This is unaffected by Nibiru. Herald of Arclight, this is for the end combo. Banishes cards from the hand. If they send cards from the hand or deck to the graveyard, it banishes them. Omni Negate is really good. The one Captain Roland, this can come back from the graveyard, enables your Charles Pops, gives 500 points, resolves at the end of the turn to essentially set up your smoke grenade play. It's really good. Power Tool Dragon, thanks for Sean for letting me borrow this to bling it out. This is how your play goes off with the DDR, essentially. There are some play versions of the deck that do play 2. I think you just need 1 for this version of the deck, but you could totally cut the formula for a second one if you wanted to. It just allows you to play if you open up the Cult Wing. But I think for this version, you just need the 1. Borreload Savage Dragon. This is for the end of the turn play or the early turn of the play, just so that your Haga Firebracks can go off. It's just really good. Omega, if you start with Gearfried, you can go into this to rip a card from the opponent's hand for just a random card. Or if you go to the end of the play, you could potentially rip another card just near the end of the turn. So this is really good too. And then lastly, Charles. Charles is the boss monster, does pops. An interesting, cool interaction that I haven't seen a lot of people know is that if you end up going first against Dragon Link and you have this set up, and they set up a Romulus and they want to equip it with the Lance, you can actually trigger this because it's when anything is equipped with an equipped card. So as soon as they equip the Lance to the Romulus, you can trigger Charles to pop it so that they can't continue, and that's one of the choke points of Dragon Link. So that's just a really cool card. And that's it for the deck. 40 cards, 40, 15. Once again, I want to shout out to AJ and Sean for helping me finish this deck. It's been a lot of fun playing it, and I hope to see it continue. There's a lot of things that can be hit from this deck, and it's still very playable, I think. But this is probably one of my favorite decks right now to play. It's just something I wanted to play for the new format. It's good to fun to play with new and experimental decks, and I totally encourage it if you love warrior decks like I do, or love fire decks like I do recently, thanks to things like Salad that have been coming out. So I think this is a really fun deck to experiment with if you haven't tried it yet. And also check out my band Quantum Drop Love. We just dropped a new single, Golden Hearts, on SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube. It's really cool. So thank you very much, and signing out.